on April 20th. Starts at 4:00. It's free to attend. You just have to go to Eventbrite and register for the event. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. It was a really, really good one, and we'll see you on the other side of it. So I thought it was, I mean, you mentioned, now that I'm looking out at it from this angle, you mentioned the connection to how the sort of, I guess, catwalks and whatnot are kind of like modeled after Star Wars. And I'm imagining the battle between Luke and Darth Vader, like in Return of the Jedi. That whole like epic last scene with them, with it's. I know a lot of people don't love Return of the Jedi, but that was my go-to as a kid, because I was born in '82, and that was the most recent one at the time, and it had Ewoks. So as a kid, I was like all on board with Return of the Jedi. Now as an adult, I favor Empire Strikes Back, but
yeah. So my pen name is LS, but I generally go by Luke at Axon, which is my day job as president of the company Axon. And the company's history is really it was really inspired by sci-fi. In the wake of the Kent State shootings, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier in the session. In the wake of the Kent State shootings, a former NASA scientist named Jack Kovar responded to a presidential call to create less lethal weapons. And he named it after his favorite childhood series, Tom Swift and his electric rifle. And so Jack invented the taser, and an entrepreneur, a couple of brothers based out of Phoenix here, Rick and Tom Smith, founded Taser, took the company public. It was very successful. But as I joined the company, I really thought the history was fascinating, and I looked into the Tom Swift series, and I discovered that it was a bunch of books where this boy inventor was up against an existential crisis, like a world-ending deal, and using one of his inventions, he like saves the day. And usually he does this with some, questionable judgment, and he's, having kind of a Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer like journey. And it was really, really popular with kids, and it inspired not only Jack Kovar, the inventor of the taser, it also inspired Steve Wozniak, the technical co-founder of Apple. As well as Ray Kurzweil, who's
the singularity.
Singularity,
yeah, singularity is near. That whole idea of the consciousness, the human consciousness being absorbed into machines, is something that's fascinated me for a long time. But as you kind of led off with it, you invited me to come out and check out this open house, which was really cool. And I want to stay hyper-focused on IGIST, but I do have a couple of questions, because something that in particular that caught my attention was your focus on, or Axon's focus on, making Phoenix a hub for creators. And I'm curious, are you looking at that from a strictly technological sense, or are you also thinking of it from an overall creative sense?
I think overall creative, and I think a lot of different regions are trying to be the next Silicon Valley. I think Phoenix has the opportunity to be the first Phoenix. We've got a really cool intersection in Utah with a lot of artists and creators, and I actually think that intersection where you're bringing together not only technologists, engineers, but also artists and people that are imagining the future, sci-fi authors, is a really cool way to kind of re-envision what we could build. And so I think Phoenix has a lot of really interesting things going for it. The majority of the IGIST team is all local our illustrator Eugene Young, who would be hard to argue she's not like brilliant, went to ASU. Our iOS developer is a really talented guy. Robbie, who's done a lot of the augmented reality work and has developed the iOS app, is a U of A grad that lives here in Phoenix. So I think there's a lot going for Phoenix.
Mm-hmm. Can you go into just a little bit more on something that you touched on with the notion of the fireside chats, and also what is your idea of how Axon and your role in it in particular plays with making with the local creative community?
Yeah, so our mission at Axon is to obsolete the bullet and to protect life. And I think if you project a really strong vision and mission, it's going to attract people that want to build the future. And I'm going to botch the quote, but there's something to the effect of like, hey, if you want to teach people how to be sailors, don't like teach them how to build boats and stuff. Teach them about like all the great places they could go. And I really think having a compelling mission and vision attracts the best people.
Now, what kind of local investment does Axon have? Is there can you talk a little bit about maybe any sort of contributions philanthropically, or like what kind of? I mean, because this is it's pretty clear that based on the presentation that I was here for, that Axon is interested in innovation and moving, as you mentioned, obsoleting the bullet, which would be fantastic. A part of that seems like it would have to be that there is also some passion involved based on at least what the IGIST platform here and the the interactive component and the immersive component, that you're also interested in education. And how does your day job play into that, if at all?
Yeah, so Axon is a public company. We're listed on NASDAQ. There's a lot of regulations around that. We are very philanthropic with organizations that support law enforcement and the communities that they serve kind of in that space. I really think the biggest impact that we're having in law enforcement is, our technologies are used to de-escalate situations and create transparency. One of the things that I'm most excited about is we're building virtual reality training for police officers where they can be put in situations and have empathy for individuals that are going through like a mental health crisis or a situation like that. And so, I really do feel we're making a big impact with Axon. I have on kind of nights and weekends and early mornings been working on this passion project of mine called IGIST, which is, it's hard to pull myself out of Axon. I'm very committed to Axon, and it's a great, we were inspired by SciFi, and now I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could kind of dust off the Tom Swift series? It hasn't really aged real well. There's a lot of like misogyny and kind of casual like racism from the 1900s.
Sure.
And but the overall concept was fantastic, and it really did inspire a lot of scientists and inventors. As I've had my own kids, I now have 3 daughters. I wanted to give them something compelling that could show them, hey, we're not teaching them calculus through fiction,
right,
but we are showing them kind of the similar, like, hey, we're up against a life-threatening, world-ending situation in like a fun, novel way. We can solve it. I would want to go a little deeper in terms of like my motivation. My oldest daughter was probably 6 years old, and I had her sit in on an earnings call. And during the call, at the end of the call, we answered all the questions, and we kind of turn off the mic. I said, "Well, Kendall, do you have any questions?" And she asked me. She said, "Where are all the women at on the call?" And for me, that was like a really big wake up call to kind of see the world through her eyes. And I thought, we should. I want to live in a world where we're giving young women kind of models that they can look at, where they can become scientists and inventors as well. Unfortunately, the Tom Swift series, great, inspired a lot of scientists. To my knowledge, they were all men, and so being the father of 3 daughters, I really wanted to kind of challenge some of the sci-fi literary norms and say here's a model of a strong female protagonist.
Right. Well, I mean, and I want to round back to that, but let's step back for a little bit about what and you've answered part of that with your motivation for creating this project, but writing a novel is no small undertaking, right? So I'm curious, what are you somebody were you a big reader as a kid? Were you was writing kind of always a thing that you had an interest in, or what? Let's go back to young Luke, let's say, and you've obviously taken a series of steps to where you're the president of a renowned company that and a high profile company. How does that your side interests turn into writing this novel?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I used to read books all the time, and my parents actually didn't have cable television, so I had no television. We would watch like a movie on the weekend, and that was it. There's no Netflix back in the 80s. Yeah. I was born in 81. Stranger Things is very like nostalgic show for me.
Absolutely.
But I would read a ton of books, and I would get lost in these books in terms of just letting your imagination kind of explore, and start off kind of reading the Roald Dahl books, which are phenomenal. James and the Giant Peach, and then J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings series. I really love C.S. Lewis books and all of those really kind of iconic books that I think every kid should read, and you're able to travel to magical places and explore new things. And as you get older, a part of that, like, I think it's just by nature of, hey, I've got a job and I've got a mortgage, I've got all these responsibilities. You kind of lose that childlike mystery and imagination. And I've been really fortunate where I've been able to keep a connection to, sci-fi and really think that it does inspire the future. And I'd like to kind of give kids an exciting model where they can, get lost in a story that really inspires them to build the future that they want to live in.
What is your background, if there is any, as a writer? What was again, like I said, writing a novel is no small undertaking. There's a lot that goes into it, especially, that's something I've been, I majored in creative writing. That was something that, but I've always been even a short story guy or a poetry guy. So the whole, the idea of writing a novel, of the undertaking that really is, of plotting something out, of doing all of your, how did you approach that, and what was sort of your process working through it?
So I went to University of Arizona on an NROTC scholarship. And at the time,